There's two ways to take Paul's words today. It sounds like he's a little two-faced. That's one way. It sounds like Paul could be saying, well, you know, I pretty much am a chameleon. I pretend to be like whoever I'm with so that they'll pay more attention to me. I suppose we all know people like that. You may know them in one context, say at work, and then you see them with their family and they're a totally different person. And then you see them at church and they seem a totally different person. And when you get to know them, you come to suspect that there's really no person there at all. That's kind of what the word two-faced means. So I want to say that I don't think that's Paul's point. I don't think he's confessing here to being a little inconstant or a little duplicitous. I think it's almost the exact opposite. Think about it this way. When you have some weird feedback here. When you have a typical kind of story in which someone is got a lot of ego, and by someone who's got a lot of ego, I mean probably everyone in the room, what we tend to do is think of our personality as this kind of force that we must express. And we express it through our behavior, our clothing, our words, our choices in 1,000 ways. And when that's what you do, if you start to express it differently in every little context, then you begin to wonder what the real person is like. That's why it seems a little duplicitous when somebody behaves totally differently in different contexts. Paul seems to have the opposite approach, and this is why I think his view is one of considerable maturity rather than duplicitous. Because he is using his behavior as a tool, not as an expression of ego. How he behaves is chosen, not just an outflowing of his personality. So he makes a decision about how to behave in different contexts. And as the contexts vary, his behavior varies. And this is what he explains. I am different in these different contexts because that's how you talk to people. You don't talk to people, he says, by insisting on who you are, putting that out there, as we might say today, and then letting them take or leave it. He seems to suggest maybe you could do that, but what he does, in the hopes of winning some, is a kind of very mature privacy in which he's not out there to express his ego, to make everyone know what Paul is like. He is out there for the sake of Christ. And in fact, if we wonder who's the real Paul underneath all of the different varying behavior, I think he has a quick answer at hand, because doesn't he say, it is not I who live, but Christ who lives in me? So his point, his personality, he's a person, so he isn't perfect, but his goal is to have Christ always be the personality whose ego is being projected. So that comes to a position of considerable maturity, I think. Now, if you take a look at our welcome statement on the front of the bulletin, it's really quite marvelous. If you let your eyes glaze over it after it's been there for a couple years now, I think, if you let your eyes glaze over it, you might forget how marvelous it is because it's become customary. But what's nice about it is that it names who we welcome. It's easy to, I know people who, when a church says that welcomes all, they immediately wonder if it really welcomes them, because everybody says that. So it doesn't really mean much, because there are churches that aren't very good at welcoming all, but they say that. So we name it. Now, we haven't named all, because that's the point. We're a work in progress, right? But we name that, here's some things we've thought about that we're really intentional. And even there's just a beautiful thing about it, that each of those polarities that it talks about, there's kind of one that the society values more than the other outside these walls, and the order has all been switched up. It's not like men first and straight first and white first. and rich first. It's all mixed up because we don't want to even express any kind of allegiance. We want to pretend like we don't even know who's first and who's second outside these walls. It's a beautiful statement, but here's what it doesn't do. It doesn't go beyond welcome. What it says is the door is open. It's very intentional about welcoming all and naming that and owning that. And then, well, maybe we don't do this, but if you only had that one statement, you might think that we just kind of sit there and wait for people to hear our welcome and come in. So the next step for St. Mark's, and this doesn't have to be on the bulletin cover, I'm not trying to make an agenda item for that. The next step for St. Mark's, however, is to go beyond welcome to the kind of maturity that Paul talks about. To not being focused on our own identity and our own ego and our own special oomph. And there's some things we do pretty good here. There are some lovely things here that we quite rightly want to share. That really, I hesitate to name them because I will omit some. But we just heard an extraordinary psalm. And that tone was written by a member of this congregation, so there's some of it right there. But that's just like a little tip of all of the things that we have to share and to offer. But if we want to take up Paul's implicit challenge, it's going to be to go beyond that. Dare I say it, to not focus on what we have and what we can offer, but to figure out how to be all things to all people. And that's really hard. The first thing is that if you want to reach someone who is not like you, looking at the way Paul does it, you're going to have to find out what they're like. And if you're one of the dominant group in society, you might think you already know what they're like, and you're wrong. You don't. So the most important thing when you know what someone else is like is to shut up and listen to them. They will tell you what their values are. They will tell you what their struggles are. They will tell you how they live. They will tell you, if you are patient enough, what they are ashamed of about themselves. They will tell you where they are hurt and broken, and they will tell you where they rejoice. And you might find, if you don't listen to them, that you get it completely backwards. That the thing they are proud of that represents triumph and struggle over oppression, you think is a little questionable and shameful. And the thing where they are a little bit nervous and ashamed and wounded might be the thing you think is wonderful. So you just gotta listen, or you'll get it wrong. Paul obviously has done his listening because that's his point. In fact, he's writing the way he does because he's actually defending himself against a charge of being duplicitous. So he's really done such a good job of this that the folks in Corinth are a little suspicious. And he says, putting my guard down, I'm this way because I'm not focusing on my ego. And the whole first letter to the Corinthians is really all about ego. It's really all about communities and peoples who are totally fixated on themselves. So he's starting right here and giving himself as an example of what that looks like not to be all me all the time. I used to be embarrassed, turning to the gospel today, by that one odd little sentence. After Simon's mother-in-law is healed, she serves them. It's like that's what it is. My mind said to me, for years I used to be embarrassed by this because I was like, really, that's all? The job of a woman once she's cured is to serve the men? Have we not, is that really Mark's point? Is that the indication that this woman is healed, that she's now able to resume her rightful place of serving the men? I don't buy that for a minute, and that's why this always embarrassed me. And then last week I read something that totally turned it around for me. This is the same word serve that Jesus uses when he says he came to serve. It's the normal word for serve that is used all the time for what a Christian disciple is supposed to be. In fact, this is the second story of healing and salvation in Mark's gospel. The first one is of a demoniac cured in the synagogue that very same day. But Simon's mother-in-law goes on to become a disciple. Now, in her way, it was probably domestic, fine. But Mark doesn't just toss these things out for local color. He's a little too cautious with his words and a little too sparing with his terminology. There's a point here, and I think what I read has it exactly right. She is the first disciple in the Gospel of Mark. Because she's the first one who moves from healing or call or following to do something. And what she does is, of course, service, not because she's a woman, but because she's a disciple, and that's what disciples do. And doesn't that connect to ego? Because that's what service is also. It's about, if one serves for one's own benefit, it's a little bit plastic. It's nice if service feels good, but let's be frank, sometimes it's very frightening, sometimes it doesn't feel good, and sometimes you never know if you've accomplished anything valuable at all. That's what real service is. It's about not doing it just for the sake of the good feeling that comes at the end of the day. Now, I don't mean to suggest that all of that is packed into two little words about Simon's mother-in-law, but it's a hint, and the rest of the gospel will show us again and again what service really looks like. But she's the first one, the first disciple of Jesus. Peter, James, John, Andrew, they were called, they followed, that's good. It's not that that's bad. In fact, they were crucial to this first disciple, Simon's mother-in-law. So, what would it look like for St. Mark's if we took the next step? And I don't mean to suggest we never do, but what would it look like if we really devoted ourselves 100% to the kind of mission that Paul describes as his own? Of being all things to all people so that we might win some. Not for the sake of our music program, not for the sake of our fellowship, not for the sake of comforting the sick, but for the sake of the people who come. Not because we have something to offer them, except for Christ. As if the only thing we had to give them was Christ. And as if we were willing to put aside all of our own specialness just for the chance of getting to know a few and bringing them that. What would that look like for us? Well, I think we can all figure that out over time, and I hope we do it. I hope we do it. Maybe it'll be on the front page of the bulletin, but it doesn't have to be. Where it has to be is in each of our own hearts and a willingness to take risks. To listen to people who might have something to say that we don't really want to hear. To get to know what people are like who are very, very different from us and what their struggles and trials are. And they may be very scary people. Well, Mark's gospel tells us what we can expect. What we can expect if we do this. The first thing we can expect is transfiguration. We'll hear about that next week. We can expect to see glimpses of what a transformed humanity would look like. It's too much to look at, and we'll want to grasp it and hold on to it even though we can't. Even though that isn't possible. But we'll get glimpses of what transformed humanity and real community and, dare I say it, love can really look like. And then, Mark tells us we can expect opposition. We can expect extremely serious opposition. If we start listening to people that the society around us would rather we didn't listen to, and if we start caring about their interests when the society around us would rather not care about their interests, we might start changing something. Because if the world is broken, it's going to have to change to heal, and any kind of change is going to dislocate someone. And Jesus knew this and set his face toward Jerusalem and didn't turn back. So we can expect some opposition, and we can expect at times terrifying opposition. If we are always safe and comfortable in this building, we are not doing our job. And then we can expect resurrection. We can expect that glimpse of a new humanity to finally be realized. We can expect and hope for a world in which we are all at one, in which our differences serve only to unite us. The question is, do we have the courage?